New York, under the glass facade of the United Nations building, world leaders gathered for the 2025 General Assembly. On this global stage, US President Donald Trump returned with a speech that drew applause from his supporters and sharp criticism from his opponents. His remarks mixed grievance, self-praise and biting commentary, spanning from attacks on the UN itself to condemnations of Europe's energy policy, to fierce words on migration and renewable energy. Trump began with what sounded more like a personal complaint than a global policy address. He told the Assembly, "It's unfortunate that I had to arrange all these things. The United Nations should have done that, but the UN never once tried to help me. I ended 7 wars. I negotiated with the leaders of all these countries. I never received a single call from the UN offering to help me make a deal. All I got from the UN is an escalator that stopped on the way up. If the First Lady wasn't in such good shape, she would have fallen, but she's in great shape and so am I. And then a teleprompter that didn't work. Those are the 2 things I got from the UN, a bad escalator and a bad teleprompter. Thank you very much." The president's humour, mixing criticism with self-aggrandizement, set the tone. Trump framed himself as the lone deal-maker abandoned by international institutions. His anecdotes about broken escalators and malfunctioning teleprompters played to the cameras, but the underlying message was frustration with multilateralism and scepticism toward the UN's effectiveness. He quickly pivoted from personal grievances to a broader geopolitical demand. Europe must do something now. They can't go on like this. They're buying oil and gas from Russia while they're fighting Russia. It's embarrassing for them. They must immediately stop all energy imports from Russia. If they don't, everything else is a waste of time. Energy security has long been one of Trump's recurring themes. For years, he warned Europe against depending on Russian gas pipelines. Now, at the United Nations, he revived the same argument, presenting Europe's dual policy, funding Moscow while sanctioning it, as both hypocritical and dangerous. His message was direct: cut Russian energy or face the consequences of strategic weakness. The theme of sovereignty and borders was next. With the same uncompromising tone that defined his campaigns, Trump declared, "It's time to end the failed experiment of open borders. End it now. I know a thing or two about this. Otherwise, your countries will go under." The language was fiery and deliberately so. It carried echoes of his rallies, even inside the diplomatic halls of the UN. For nationalist movements across Europe and beyond, these words resonated. But for advocates of migration and human rights, they marked another attack on refugees and global solidarity. Trump then moved from sweeping rhetoric to citing statistics, presenting his case with pointed numbers. According to the European Council, in 2024, almost 50% of the prison population in Germany were foreigners. In Austria, the figure is as high as 53%. The figures drew sharp murmurs in the hall. While some nodded in recognition of real pressures facing European systems, analysts later warned that Trump's numbers were selective, combining different categories and exaggerating the link between migration and crime. But the president's purpose was clear: to illustrate what he called the consequences of uncontrolled immigration. From migration, Trump shifted to energy once again, but this time with an attack not on Russia, but on renewable power. "We're putting an end to renewable energies, which are falsely called that. They're a joke. They don't work. They're too expensive. They don't generate enough electricity to run the factories needed to make a country great. The wind doesn't blow. These wind turbines are so pathetic. Their operation is so expensive." The line on renewables sparked one of the strongest reactions of the day. Environmental activists condemned it as misinformation and a dangerous step backward in the fight against climate change. Supporters, however, hailed it as realism in the face of energy shortages and economic strain. For Trump, the message was consistent. Fossil fuels and nuclear energy were the reliable foundations of national strength. He expanded this critique by pointing directly to Europe. Europe still has a long way to go. Many countries there are on the brink of destruction. Because of this green energy agenda, Germany was on the decline with migration and with energy policy. They wanted to become climate neutral, and they went bankrupt. Then a new government came to power, and they returned to fossil fuels and nuclear power. That's good, that's safe. By framing Germany as a cautionary tale, Trump sought to illustrate the risks of climate-neutral policies. The image he painted was stark: a Europe weakened by migrants, bankrupted by green energy and saved only by a return to coal, oil, and nuclear power. It was rhetoric designed to provoke as much as to persuade, yet Trump's speech was not limited to Europe or the UN. He also turned to Russia's faltering war in Ukraine. Everyone thought Russia would win this war within 3 days, but it didn't turn out that way. It was supposed to be a small-scale operation. This doesn't make Russia look good. They look bad. In contrast to his earlier years when critics accused him of downplaying Moscow's aggression, this time Trump mocked Russia's failures. The shift reflected the evolving reality of the battlefield, Ukraine's unexpected resilience and Russia's grinding, inconclusive war. For the audience, it was a rare moment where Trump's rhetoric aligned with mainstream Western frustration at Moscow's aggression. But if Trump's critique of Russia surprised some, his criticism of Europe and the UN was all too familiar. Throughout his speech, he repeated themes from his earlier addresses: distrust of global institutions, emphasis on sovereignty, and rejection of what he called globalist experiments. His style was also unmistakable, blending humour with insult, anecdotes with sweeping generalizations, and criticism with self-praise. Observers in the chamber responded in mixed fashion. Some leaders nodded when he pressed for energy security, remembering their own struggles to find alternatives to Russian gas. Others frowned or whispered when he dismissed renewable energy as a joke. Diplomats shifted uneasily at his broad statements about migration, and journalists scribbled furiously, knowing his comments would dominate headlines worldwide. Beyond the immediate reactions, analysts noted the deeper implications. Trump's framing of Germany as bankrupt due to climate policy struck at the heart of Europe's identity as a climate leader. His insistence that migration equated to societal collapse challenged international commitments to humanitarian law, and his attack on the UN itself underscored a broader American disengagement from multilateral institutions under his leadership. Still, for Trump's supporters, this was exactly the speech they wanted. It showed him as unafraid, blunt, and willing to call out allies and rivals alike. They saw his words as proof that Washington would no longer be bound by diplomatic niceties, but would instead demand results. For critics, however, the speech marked another retreat from global leadership. They argued that by mocking renewables, dismissing migration, and undermining the UN, Trump was not strengthening America's position, but isolating it. To them, his speech confirmed fears of a world where cooperation gave way to nationalism and rivalry. The contrast could not have been sharper. A president who claimed to have ended 7 wars while declaring that only he, and not the UN, had the courage to act. A leader who told Europe to abandon green energy and migration while mocking Russia's military failures. A man who, on the most multilateral stage in the world, delivered a message of sovereignty, suspicion, and scorn. As the chamber emptied, one thing was certain. Donald Trump had once again turned the UN stage into a platform for his distinctive brand of politics. Half showmanship, half warning. His words will fuel debate in capitals from Berlin to Moscow, from Brussels to Washington, and they will sharpen the global divide over what role America should play in an increasingly fractured world. For his allies, the speech was a reminder that Trump sees himself as a defender of national strength and common sense against what he calls the failures of global institutions. For his critics, it was proof of a US president out of step with the urgent challenges of climate change, migration, and international cooperation. Either way, this was Trump at his most characteristic: combative, unapologetic, and determined to leave the world reacting to his words long after he had left the podium.
It's too bad that I had to do these things instead of the United Nations doing them. And sadly, in all cases, the United Nations did not even try to help in any of them. I ended 7 wars, dealt with the leaders of each and every one of these countries, and never even received a phone call from the United Nations offering to help in finalizing the deal. All I got from the United Nations was an escalator that on the way up stopped right in the middle. If the First Lady wasn't in great shape, she would have fallen, but she's in great shape. We're both in good shape. We both stood. And then a teleprompter that didn't work. These are the 2 things I got from the United Nations: a bad escalator and a bad teleprompter. Thank you very much. And Europe has to step it up. They can't be doing what they're doing. They're buying oil and gas from Russia while they're fighting Russia. It's embarrassing to them, and it was very embarrassing to them when I found out about it, I can tell you that. But they have to immediately cease all energy purchases from Russia. Otherwise, we're all wasting a lot of time. It's time to end the failed experiment of open borders. You have to end it now. See, I can tell you. I'm really good at this stuff. Your countries are going to hell. Everyone thought Russia would win this war in 3 days, but it didn't work out that way. It was supposed to be just a quick little skirmish. It's not making Russia look good. It's making them look bad. According to the Council of Europe, in 2024, almost 50% of inmates in German prisons were foreign nationals or migrants. In Austria, the number was 50, getting rid of the falsely named renewables. By the way, they're a joke. They don't work. They're too expensive. They're not strong enough to fire up the plants that you need to make your country great. The wind doesn't blow. Those big windmills are so pathetic and so bad, so expensive to operate. Europe, on the other hand, has a long way to go, with many countries being on the brink of destruction because of the green energy agenda. And I give a lot of credit to Germany. Germany was being led down a very sick path, both on immigration, by the way, and on energy. They were going green, and they were going bankrupt. And the new leadership came in, and they went back to where they were, with fossil fuel and with nuclear.